Hi, so in this video I'm just going to show you how to set up a UDM or a UDR or a UDM-Pro or a UDM-SE. Just going to give you the basics. It's similar for all of these. Obviously they are slightly different in their physical setup. And I've got on the bench here, you can see a UDM there on the left hand side, a UDM-Pro, and I've actually got a UDR here, so Ubiquiti Dream Router. Ubiquiti Dream Router has got an access point in the top. It's got an SD card slot. It can run two of the OS console, the UniFi OS console applications, so it can run talk, video, network, access and ID, but you can only run two of those at a time. It's got two PoE ports as well, so it's a lovely little all-round router with the cloud key essentially built into it. So we're going to set this up. So the first thing we need to do is we're just going to take, this is my white cable. This comes, if you like, from my router. So that's my first point of call. If you have fiber to the node, i.e. you're still getting your telephone or you're still getting your internet over a physical telephone line, then you do need some other modem in place. If not, this can plug directly into your network termination box. The way I like to set this up, I like to set this up start with, so it's plugged into something that already has internet access. All right, you can do it straight away. You can set up your PPPoE and stuff like that if you need to, but I like to just get this running and configured. So our first thing is we're going to plug this in. As you can see, I've plugged my white cable, like I said. My orange cable here goes out to my laptop. I'm going to then plug the power in and let this unit boot up. You can see a little display on the front screen there, and you can see the ring starting to line up or light up. So then you're going to start up a web browser. You should have received an IP address. You should have got something probably by default in the 192.168.1.1 range. And you tried to go onto a website to start with, and this will actually start up and you will get this welcome screen here. Let me just see if I can actually restart this. Here we go. So the first time you try to get out the internet, you'll get this lovely little picture. It's reminding you of what you need to have plugged in. On the front of my actual box at the moment, it says no internet connection. So we're going to do setup UDR. It is interesting. There are some initial issues, the same as we had with the UDM-Pro when this first came out, that for some reason, even though it picks up a proper IP address on the WAN interface, that we often have issues with this initial device being able to call home. I'm not quite sure what it's needing to do. It's needing to call home, or its firmware update out of the box isn't totally up to date. So we're actually going to do a setup this console offline, which is the best way to start, and then we should hopefully be able to reboot it and it should work perfectly. So we're going to set up console offline, and off we go. All right, so we're going to give this a name. It is really up to you what you're going to call it. I'll leave this called UDR. We can rename that later on. Again, how you want to set this up, personal or business. I'll leave this as a personal. And then set up local password. So what do we actually want to set? It's up to you what you want to set this password in. So let's set this as something that we can do. Default -0101 is probably a starting point for us. What I always like to do, and we'll go back and change this later on anyway. What I like to do on this, just store that temporarily in Notepad so I don't lose it. And we're going to create local access. We're going to set the things for when we'd like to go and check if we want it to do an update schedule. You can turn that off if you want. Once you've probably got it going, you may decide to turn it off. We can now create what we want as our Wi-Fi name. So I maybe call this home internet. You can call it whatever you want it to be. Remember, this is what you're going to give out to everybody who wants to connect their device or your TV or whatever it is. So just for the moment in this setup, I'm just putting a nice, simple, easy password on there. Again, you can set that to be whatever you would like later on. I don't bother with sending diagnostics to Ubiquiti. So how we've got this remote access is disabled at the moment. The name is UDR. Our Wi-Fi is set up. My Brisbane location, but we can obviously change those over later. And we can choose finish. So this should now go and set up our console. And once this has gone through this little stage, then we should have more control over the apps. We also need to make sure that this is online. And once it's online, then we can obviously do some of our final configuration. And I want to just walk you through some of those additional steps that we can do to make sure our Wi-Fi is set up the way that we need it to be. So I'm just going to pause very slightly while we wait for this to go through and finish. And as I say that, always it goes through and does its last bit of a finish off. Look, you're going to get this. This doesn't mean that it's operating insecurely. This is HTTPS. This is a self-signed certificate. So you're always going to get this error certificate authority invalid because there's no issuing. If you want to fix it, you can go and buy yourself or get a free SSL certificate, but you're accessing it from inside your network, so it's not unsafe. You just need to remember to choose the advanced button and then choose proceed to UniFi unsafe. All right, so here we go. Now we can log in locally. All right, and we can hopefully have a little bit of a look around here. Oh, I didn't put in the wrong password, which of course wasn't a good starting point. All right, let's put this and log in. All right, and here's our console. So it's telling us it has been updated. This is very similar, you will find, to the UDM-Pro and the UDM-SE. The UDR can run all of, like I said, all of the UniFi OS console applications, but it can only run 2 at a time. It's not got a super amount of memory, and it can probably only deal with maybe 4 or 5 cameras and maybe less than 10 access points. So just do be aware of that as you set this up. So the idea being that you have these options to go into to configure the application. But firstly, before we do that, we're just going to go through our settings, and we're just going to make sure our settings are all as we need them to be. So we're hoping that this can see the internet. Well, it has a WAN IP address. So in all honesty, we would hope that it has. We maybe will give it a test in a moment. We can see how much memory, we can see much internal storage it has. You can increase this with a memory card into it, which obviously will allow you to store camera footage and other bits and pieces on it. Notifications, if you wanted to send notifications to you, then all of those will come out of here. Updates, again, we chose this. It is update. It wants us to do an update, quite a big update, you can see. So we're going to let that run through in a moment. So you can now, if you want to set your auto updates, this is interesting. So it defines it into 2 things. You can update just the actual appliance itself, which I would suggest you do. The applications can have some knock-on effects. So I would suggest that you manually update those till you're totally sure, because it'll often push out updates to your cameras, to your access points. Sometimes you can get a few features that aren't totally up to date or totally working properly. So I would not normally put that into your automatic upgrade schedule. So we're just going to set this off and update, and then we'll just have a look at the final couple of settings on there, and then from that point we'll maybe just go and check through things like the UniFi network and make sure that that's configured correctly for you, and you should get your feel for how everything is set up and working. Okay, so after probably about 5 minutes, I refreshed the web browser and I could see that this was actually doing something. It disconnected me from the internet for a little bit. And now I can see that we've actually come back to a slightly different setup. And we can see that we're running on, at the time of recording this, one of the latest. We can see both of these show us up to date. And if you've not done anything with this, you can, and you're doing this in your house or whatever, you can add a floor plan in here, and then you can map out, as we go through network, a whole load of your places of your access points. But let's just finish off now our settings. If we go into users, all right, users are people who can have access. This at the moment is only set up for local access. Because that's the way we wanted to do it. If you want to be able to get at this remotely, so you want to be able to manage it when you're out of this property, then you need to link it to UniFi's cloud management, which is at unifi.ui.com. So you need to go and create yourself an account there, all right, and then you can choose add user, and you can invite a new user if you want, whatever, in your instance, administrator. You can give them choose that it's a Ubiquiti account. You need to enable remote access, which we'll do in a moment, and then you can, this unit will become connected to that. You will also find that if you've bought one of these from the Tech Geeks from us, or you've had some configuration or you've asked for our assistance, you'll also find our user in here, which you can control or remove as you need. Obviously in this you might want to add in your email address if you want to gain notifications and updates, so that's something to think about in there, but that's a little bit of extra admin work that you can do to tidy it up. You can create varying roles, and you can show which applications users can get at. So maybe you've created an admin user, you've added on some cameras in UniFi Protect, but what you only want somebody to be able to see the UniFi Protect side of things, and so you can set up an application or you set up a user a role that just allows those certain bits, which might be useful if they need to be able to get at the doorbell or they need to be able to view the cameras to see what's going on. Your notifications in here will show you what's happening. You can see that we've just updated it, and then our settings menu is now slightly different. All right, we're going to come to these bits in a minute, but let's just check on updates. Like I've said, automatically update the UniFi OS. That is this console itself, but we've chosen not to automatically update these applications. As you can see, there's an update available for network, so I will set that going while we're continuing through the rest of this screen. So on system here, this was what we would need to enable if we want to have access remotely. So you're going to put your UniFi.ui account in here, and that will then allow you, it'll give you a slightly different console to log into. So you'll still be able to log into this locally using its local IP address, which is by default 192.168.1.1, but you will also be able to access it remotely in the same way, but using UniFi's cloud to access it. You can download your backup of the whole console. You can set obviously your time zone, put your map location in if you want to. Got options to restart the console, factory reset. SSH, if you need to do some command level stuff, then you'll need to set that here, but it's a little bit more advanced than probably this video is worthwhile. Your notifications that we talked about, what do you want to receive notifications of? Default, you can see in here a set for push notifications for available updates and status, and you can now choose that as custom if you wanted to, and then enable all of those extra little bits in there. Storage, there's no SD card, so there's nothing to report on there, and then about console is just showing you what IPs they've got there, and any speed or your memory usage and everything. All right, so before we go on and configure this, some people want to get an idea of actually how this maybe performs. So I've just gone and grabbed the speed test app. This device itself is, or this property that we're testing this on, we have 2 kilometers of fiber that we own in the road. It's a one-to-one uncontended 1 gigabit connection. So we should be able to get a gig by a gig. Obviously, when you do a speed test, you do have some overhead. So anything above that 920 megasecond would show we're seeing the full gig. Obviously, this is a small consumer router. So I would expect this to be giving us 300 or 400 megasecond. But let's hit the go button. Let's get a little bit of an idea of what we're going to see on here. 2 millisecond ping. There we go. We've got 570, 580 megasecond on our download. Almost 600, so a pretty good router for the money. Obviously, like I said, you will need a modem if you need to connect this into your NBN if you've not got fiber to the node, but you can see comfortably out the box at this moment in time, it does 600 plus megasecond. So let's go off now and do our next little bit of setting up here, which will be in our network appliance or our network application. That's still just loading at this moment in time, so we're just going to give that a minute to finish updating itself. Once it's updated, we should have everything in this place to do what we need, and we'll just go through some of those menu options to get you started, at least with UniFi Network, which is obviously your network side of things, your firewalling or your routing side of things, plus your access points. So I'll be back in a moment once that's finished updating. Okay, superb. So that took probably about 3-4 minutes to finish updating. And so I'm just going to walk you through UniFi Network. UniFi Network on this box is probably the most likely thing you need to configure to start with, which is for your wireless and networking side of things. So we're just going to click on networking, and it's going to load us into this page. This is your overview of everything that's going on in your network, how much internet traffic, what applications are running through it, any devices, who's most active, showing you what IP you've got on your WAN port, and your internet connection, and some ideas of uptime and everything else that goes with it. All right, it has its own inbuilt speed test, which we can give it a little run on here and see what it comes up with. Here we go. All right, so it's giving us pretty much the same as what we did before, so I'm happy with that. All right, so if you've not been used to the UniFi Network console at all, let's give you a little run through. So we start on our dashboard, which is this. We're then going to move into our topography or topology. This will show you how all your devices are connected. I've only got one laptop, that's my test laptop, and it's connected to this Dream router. If you have more, it'll show you. If you have switches, it will build those in to even show you more. It's just a little different way of referencing what you have. Next, we have the devices. We only have our UDR. If you were to add another access point or a switch, again, those will all be listed with their IP addresses and speeds, and you can manage those. Again, on our client devices, this shows the laptop, shows the IP address it's got. This might be your phones, it might be TVs, it might be smart light bulbs. You'll be able to see everything that's going on in here. Statistics give you an idea of what's being used, who's using it, and the amount of data that's happening. Insights, again, will show you how good your Wi-Fi is going, give you an idea, if you want to, in your environment, what's around and about you, and other access points that are running. You can see some of these other ones that we have around here, and it can actually do some speed tests on that Wi-Fi. And then at the last bit here, you've got your system logs, but there's been very little actually happening on here because we haven't enabled those, and we haven't got any user activity. Notifications, software updates, alarms of things dropping, if you've got other access points or other switches. So that's really the console there for you. That's a run through of what you see. What we're now more interested in is actually get through our configuration, and it is pretty simple. The first thing you're interested in is your Wi-Fi. We configured this when we started the device setup, but if we want to make changes, so we can now click on here, we can see our password. If we've forgotten it, we can change our SSID, and we can give this a new password if we want. There are options here as you progress on for different VLANs, and that's what this network option would be. And if we have multiple access points, then again you can choose, you can create multiple Wi-Fi networks with multiple SSIDs, so different network names, and you can choose which access points broadcast those. This here is probably one of the starting points that people look at, and again, most of the defaults in here will probably be for your safest use. We're running in the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz. It broadcasts in both of those. Remember, I'm using a UDR, a Ubiquitous Dream router, which is actually a Wi-Fi 6 router anyway. We can create hotspots, probably not covering that in this video, but there is an option here to create a whole bunch of guest Wi-Fi hotspots that you can use vouchers or passwords, linked to Facebook logins, various other ways of doing it. Band steering is an interesting one. As you know, wireless is about density, not distance. The further you are away from the access point, the slower your device runs. But at the same time, it also affects other users that are connected to that same access point. One of the things you can do is potentially push people to always use the faster frequencies. This does have some issues of meaning that devices that are at the edge of reception can drop in and out a bit more. So you could try this if you're having a few performance issues. It might help. Bandwidth profile, you can actually create profiles that restrict certain users, certain devices to a certain amount of bandwidth. So if you want to make sure you've always got bandwidth for your work happening, and you want to make sure that 3 or 4 gaming machines only have a small amount, you can collect those MAC addresses all together, and then you can actually assign them to a bandwidth profile and restrict how much internet connection or how bandwidth they get. Some advanced options in here: client isolation. You probably don't want that in a normal home environment. That means that when a device connects, it can't see any other devices that are connected to that same wireless access point. If you've got printers, and you've got other computers that you're sharing with, that won't work. Proxy ARP, again, advanced settings, UAIPSD. These are things that you're probably not going to need to worry about at this time. Fast roaming. Fast roaming allows devices to quickly move between varying access points, but as you can see, it does have some issues there if the devices don't support it. So in this instance, we've only got one access point, the one that's built into our Dream router, so we're not going to mess around with that setting at all. So our security standards, again, this is up to you for which ones you choose. By standard, it's going to have chosen WPA2. You can push this up further. Do be aware that some devices don't support things like WPA3. So this is all about your password. It's about the strength of your password up at the top here. All right, Wi-Fi is intrinsically insecure anyway. And it is relatively easy to obtain this password, so having a complicated password probably doesn't make a lot of difference. Certainly in a home environment it doesn't, but you can change the levels here. You again probably not going to really worry about most of the bits in here. Hiding your home Wi-Fi or hiding your Wi-Fi if you want to. If you want that name at the top not to be broadcast anywhere, then you can hide it. Do remember that just hiding it doesn't make it invisible. Remember, your device, like your phone, is saying, hey, hello, is home internet available? And if I was using a sniffing device outside your house, I could find your home Wi-Fi even if it was hidden because your device is broadcasting it. So if you just don't want it, it's more of a visual thing more than anything else. Wanting to do something here, you can obviously define which devices can or can't access the network, and you could exclude some if you wanted to, and you can set a schedule on here if you want to turn this off. Some people do this where the Wi-Fi is in near people's bedrooms or something like that, and they want to make sure that at night time there's no extra Wi-Fi signals running around that don't need to. So that's how you could apply those. So that's really, this is probably the one section that you'll probably be in the most. Once it's set up, you're pretty much good to go and you can move on. Networks again, this defines the IP address allocation. By default, this is all set up for you. You can change this to be a different IP range, and you can scale these however you want to. So if you want to change this IP range that's being allocated out, then you can, and off it'll go. It'll change and it'll set a new IP range out for the devices internally. Why is this useful? Well, like I said, this is by default uses the 192.168.1 range, which is very common. Potentially your upstream, your WAN connection could also be in that range if you're connecting it to another router. And so to avoid issues, you would change this to a different IP address. In this instance, maybe 192.168.16.1, and all your devices will change into that area. Network type, again, we can have guest networks. We can have some level of content filtering put on in here. We can, obviously, this is setting up how this device is actually a DHCP server, and it's giving out all of the IP addresses, and we can do some control over here of IPv6. So then moving on from this screen, we've got our internet connection. So this is where I say it is better to set this up right away from the beginning yourself offline, because then if you need to come back and make any changes to this, it's easy to do. So our default WAN at the moment, we've just got this set up in this way. We can set our expected speeds if we want to. You might be connected to an internet service provider that needs a VLAN, so you can enable that. Can clone a MAC if you've maybe had a device that your ISP is locked to their internet connection. You can set up your IP addresses that you want here. You can set this to auto if it's going to receive IP DNS directly from your ISP. And you can choose, at the moment we've got this set as a static IP address, but you can come back here and choose this as DHCP, and it should get an automatic IP address. You also have the option in here to set this up to use PPPoE. A PPPoE is a common connection that you will need with your internet service provider. So you would come into here and they've maybe given you a username and password. So this is again the best way of why you set it up offline, because at least you've got an internet connection. You can get it updated, get it to the latest firmware, and then you can just come into this section in internet, choose this, change this to PPPoE, put your username and password that your internet service provider has given you, and from that point on you should be ready to go, and now they'll be able to plug it directly into your ISP's internet connection. I'm not going to make any changes on that page. Mine's set up as a manual connection. All right, so those are probably the key areas. Many of these other bits I'm not going to cover in this video because they're a little bit more advanced than this basic setup, but you can go in here and create a VPN so you can remotely access your network. In traffic management, if you want to create some rules to protect your network, to inspect traffic and other bits and pieces, you can create it here, as well as in firewalls and security if you want to be able to turn on some threat detection and everything else. It does have some performance hits on the device because it is doing some filtering of your traffic. It may stop some of your home devices working quite so well, but you can write rules around that. Do remember, this is not a subscription service. This is just using free items out there on the internet, so free signatures. So it will have a good effect. It just might not be as good as a actual true firewall vendor, but it will give you some control over what's happening. Your profiles here cover things like your guest hotspot, changing some of your switch ports if you want to, and then like where you've created bandwidth management rules, and anything to do with ports and IPs, which is to do with your firewalling and everything in your system. Again, do you want this to be running 24-hour clock? Do you want to be in dark or light mode? Wi-Fi man, do you want that to enable, which allows it to do some of the speed checking stuff? Do you want to get early release updates? I would suggest you probably don't. Do you this want to be firmware updated? Do you want to update, get updates automatically and schedule your updates? And now it allows you to bring things like download your latest backup. And how do you want to run your backups? Do you want it to regularly update backups? And so that you can grab those over a period of time. What do you want to do with system logging, and anything you need to log into the device with. So there's quite a lot of additional configuration bits and pieces that you can do. Mail server configuration is needed. You can connect this up to your Office 365 or your free email account or Gmail if you want to, or use I think UniFi or Ubiquiti's cloud SMTP server to send out your notifications. So that's really a basic run through of what we've done, of how we configure this unit and get the basics out of it. Hopefully that will help you get this connected to your network, get you onto the internet, and be able to how to set up your Wi-Fi connections.